You're listening to One Free Family, a new take on peaceful parenting, where you can hear ideas for helping to raise free, independent, and peaceful children. Visit onefreefamily.com to connect and listen. Here are your hosts, James and Taylor Davis.
And we're back with another episode of One Free Family. This is James.
And Taylor.
And we are excited today to talk about self-directed learning, and actually to talk about it in a different way, I believe, than we've talked about it in the past, which is to say we're going to try and paint a more realistic picture of what this actually has looked like in our family and how our approach will not only winds up looking very different than the learning curve of a lot of different kids, but how also this can be applied to people who don't just have their kids at home all day, every day, or you just let the kids be self-directed all day, every day. So
sure. Yeah, I think we're going to share some examples from our life just about what self-directed learning has looked like and what our kids have learned from being pretty much self-directed most of their time. Because I was thinking that if the concept of self-directed learning is new to you, or you're just kind of dipping your toes in, it might be hard to even envision how it actually works, because most of us were raised in the paradigm that learning happens when we go into a classroom and we sit down and somebody tells us what we need to learn, and then they teach us. And for many of us, that has kind of translated to challenges with learning new things, or the belief that it might be harder, because so often we've been told that we have to be kind of told what to be taught, and then we have to be taught in the way that's best for the teacher. So I think we wanted to just illustrate really on a day-to-day basis what it actually looks like and how it works. And I do want to highlight that it's going to look really different for every child. When you're supporting your kids to be self-directed, especially those of you whose kids are not in school, your kids' learning journey and trajectory is going to look really different from their school age or from their schooled peers' learning trajectory, because they're going to learn on their own timeline. They're not going to learn the skills that the kids in school are learning at the same exact time as them. So I just want to highlight that, because that can seem unsettling for people at first, I think, if their kid is not as up to speed on a certain skill or subject as their schooled peers. So, for example, for us, what that has looked like is both of our older kids, who are 8 and 6, 8.5 and 6.5, they are probably ahead of their peers when it comes to math and numeracy and those sorts of skills. They just kind of naturally gravitate towards mathematical thinking. And so our family plays around with math a lot, and their math skills are probably ahead of their peers. I would say at the same time, for both of them, their writing skills are well below where their same age peers would be, just because they have not had a great interest in, picking up a pen or a pencil and writing. And so for some people, that can be a common kind of challenge to face when you see something like that happening. But we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and why we feel confident in the fact that our kids are going to develop on their own timelines.
Yeah, I think we're already talking about it.
We're talking about it. We're doing it. We are doing it.
I want to say also first, before I get in a little deeper, complaint of the week. We both have this weird sore throat situation.
Yeah, our throats are terrible.
You're going to hear us clearing our throats and coughing and stuff. So we did the math and figured that you would be happier to hear from us at less than 100% than if you would have had to miss us for a week.
I think we knew if we tried to save it for later in the week, it's always hard to get it done.
Yeah,
this is our time.
Especially right now. There's other things going on in our lives that make it really difficult to record at nighttime.
Yeah.
So,
can I do a couple housekeeping things before we dive further in, or no?
I just had a thought.
Yeah, do it.
Specifically related. I think the housekeeping can wait to the end.
Let's do it.
So
at the end. I'm in.
Great. So I was just going to piggyback on the idea of each kid's path looking different, because I think this is one of the most important ones to me that I've observed, where many people picture learning, especially for children, as this thing that happens in sort of a straight, gradual, upward sloping line, and this is why you can tell this, because when a kid comes home from school, they say, what did you learn in school today?
Right.
Oh, you're going to learn a little bit of biology today and a little bit of reading and a little bit of whatever. And that is a way that some people learn. That's true. And I think those people wind up being lifelong academics, those people that are happy just to get in there and chip away every single day. And I think for a lot of people, that's not their natural learning rhythm. And what I've observed is, for me, like in my own personal life, those things, especially things that I wasn't choosing to learn, I would gradually ingest some amount of that every day. I would at some point demonstrate that I had acquired that knowledge on some manner of assessment, and then I would leave most of that behind.
Right.
And then I would move on to the next thing. And for our kids and many self-directed people, and myself in adulthood, I guess I would say, is I often go through long fallow periods where like the actual obvious quote unquote learning isn't going to be apparent to other people. And then all of a sudden I will appear with this new skill or new thing I've been thinking about or working on. And people are like, whoa, all of a sudden you're like you play guitar now, you know? And it's like, I don't know, you know, I just decided I wanted to play guitar. So I picked it up and played for 8 hours a day for 2 years. And now here I am. I can play guitar or whatever, right? And I think that for many people that is okay in grownups because grownups are doing kind of grown-up things. But for kids, it can feel very disconcerting to see those fallow periods or those quiet periods or, you know, where you can't point to the specific, because today we actually will talk about a lot of specific things that our kids have picked up along the way. But if you were to zoom in on any given day, you may not have seen them working on those things actively. And that might be concerning if you are just either whether you're first dabbling in helping your kids to be more self-directed in their learning, or even if you're, as the other thing I wanted to touch on, even if you're just trying to carve out time for that self-direction outside of the school sort of 9 to 5.
If your kids are at school.
Yeah, because like I want to say that one of the biggest things that I struggled with growing up, and I've seen this in so many people, is kids are, even school kids are making such a big commitment of their time. Maybe they're not choosing it, but they're committing so much time to academics, to school, and oftentimes extracurriculars. But self-directed pursuits can still happen outside of those hours, even though they're very few, if people don't stand in the way.
But their parents have to make space for that for them.
Yeah. And oftentimes those pursuits might be watching YouTube videos at first or whatever, like as they continue to, you know, unwind throughout the rest of their day. And it might take some time for them to decompress. But if there's constantly that power struggle and that dynamic of, you know, one person trying to get the other person to do something, that is the most, difficult environment for self-directed learning to thrive.
That's a great point. And you brought something else up that I just wanted to highlight, which is there are a lot of times that you won't see the learning happening. And if we're talking about potential challenges or concerns you might have about this approach, that's one I hear a lot, because another part of the paradigm that many of us grew up in, being schooled formally, is that if you can't show it, you haven't learned it. And that there's this expectation that children in school will show and prove their learning, and they have to perform, right? They have to take a test or give a presentation or do some sort of assignment, and then they're evaluated on it. And so I think for parents who are trying to make space for their kids to be self-directed, I do hear them say sometimes that they're concerned their kid isn't learning anything. And I do want to say that a lot of the learning that happens, you will not see it right away. And some of it you'll probably never see. I mean, I would say even for kids who are in school, they're learning things that they may never talk about or we may never see, but that it's happening. And that when you move away from asking or requiring kids to perform or prove their learning, you're not going to see it as much. But I think it actually ultimately feels safer for the kids too, because they're not, they're doing it for themselves, right? It's intrinsically motivated. So I just want to say that to kind of help alleviate some fears around that.
Well, yeah. And I think whenever we introduce external evaluation or assessment, you run the risk of it being all about the evaluation or assessment. I can say this as someone who briefly taught high school kids in my student teaching, but certainly as a college student, there's nothing that you can do to deflate a passionate teacher more quickly than to say, is this going to be on the test, right? And the teacher feels all sad, like, oh man, I'm sitting here like talking about this incredible story from history, and like all the people I'm talking to, they just want to know if they're going to have to prove it to me later. And it's like, I understand why you're frustrated and sad, but like you're bringing that on yourself.
Totally.
If you're telling them at some point, oh, like, hey, we're just all here and I'm like the guru and you're the students and we're loving learning and whatever. And in 2 weeks, you're going to have to prove it, buddy.
Right.
You know?
And to be fair, a lot of teachers' hands are tied a little bit,
of course,
depending on the system that they're in.
I don't disagree at all, but I guess like in terms of parents taking a different perspective on these sorts of things, like if you're getting that sort of sick feeling that comes when a kid demonstrates that they're aware that this whole thing is about them being assessed at some point, one path to feeling less cynical about that whole thing is making it less of a transaction, making it less of like, I'm going to teach you this and then you're going to have to prove it.
Right, exactly.
And even if that's happening in their own school, like instead of focusing on your kids' grades when they come home, focus on what did you guys talk about in history class today? Not what did you learn? Like prove that you learned something to me today because I'm feeling insecure or worried about that.
Sure.
What did you guys talk about? Oh, the Civil War. You read Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, like, let's talk. What'd you think about that? How did that feel to learn about that? Like, so instead of it's basically the hack is changing it away from prove that you've learned this. People do this to kids all the time too. Like, can you sing your ABCs or can you count to 10 or whatever? You just get that out of your vocabulary altogether. Unless you have like a sincere concern.
Yeah, I think that goes without being.
Yeah, like, and again, if your kid is in school for 7.5 hours a day and you have a sincere concern that nothing is being learned there, then that's probably time for a parent-teacher conference rather than putting it all on the kid and like trying to figure out if your kid is defective and not trying to learn anything or something. But I'm going too deep on that one. So I'm getting from your look, your eyes are glazing over a little bit. So I'm gonna back it up for a second and get on to the other things we're going to talk about. So the next potential, why are you giggling?
That was so funny.
Well, yeah, I look over and Taylor's just looking like those very kids that I was teaching. The difference between who and whom in my student teaching.
You were on a runaway train.
I was going a little far, a little fast and loose with the topic. Yeah. So.
Okay.
Were you ready?
I think so.
Oh, wait. I can dust off my old other little like concerns or potential pitfalls. And some of these wind up being like funny if you can have a good perspective on this. But one of the things I'm noticing is that our kids are developing like an eclectic collection of skills and gaps in their, and skills and knowledge and gaps in their skills and knowledge. And like, it's kind of funny because one of the things that occurred to me, I was quizzed on this by someone, I can't remember who it was exactly, but they were like, so what if your kid is like 15 and has never heard of George Washington? And like someone asks them or like brings up George Washington and they're like, who's that? Right. And I was like, yeah, that would be a little probably uncomfortable for them. Like everyone would be like a little bit weirded out. That they like never heard of this person, George Washington. And how would it really change their life? Like if they started to feel insecure about their understanding of American history, like learning about George Washington takes about 10 seconds.
Yeah.
So like at least the big notes, that you would need to prove to be allowed at a cocktail party or something. And as a parent, it's probably more about you feeling uncomfortable.
Like you've kind of done your job or something.
Yeah. And like, those little reading and writing are two such milestones, but like recognizing that there are probably some things that are portrayed as sort of mandatory, but might not be. But if they do come up, it's hard for it not to feel like you've failed in some way.
And I think I want to point out too that with those things that kids are going to maybe miss because they're not being taught the formal school curriculum, that there are so many things I was taught in school that I forget, right? So, So I think that if we want to talk about quote gaps, that everybody kind of leaves school with what we might call gaps, because a lot of the things that were taught in school we don't remember because they weren't meaningful to us at the time. So once we tried to prove our learning, whether we did a good job of that or not, like you said, James, we kind of let it go. So everybody really is going to develop their own set of things that they really hold on to and that they don't, whether they're schooled or not.
Right. And yeah, actually on a similar vein, this actually came up in the One Free Family Facebook group, which is that's called a natural or native insertion of the housekeeping stuff.
Good job.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well done.
But in the One Free Family Facebook group, best place on the internet, we had a really great discussion with a woman there who was talking about how their family is very musical. I think we mentioned this on the podcast
We
too.
did.
But circling back around on that story, she had a really incredible reflection on it or take on it where, so just to catch you up in case you didn't listen to that story or you're not in the group, essentially her son's very talented at a musical instrument, but really only liked the lessons and not the part where he had to practice on his own at home. And this idea of like, well, what if he actually really loves playing the guitar, but only at these lessons, right? And like for him though, that's the right amount of guitar. Like he really likes it. He's feeling filled up by it. He looks forward to the lessons, but like not so much sitting there practicing green sleeves or whatever on the guitar on his own. And I thought that was a very illustrative example of this part where like, as a parent, I think it's really easy to get attached to your kid learning an amount about something that you find appropriate, right? Or like
developing the level of proficiency that you think they should develop.
Yeah, all of a sudden like your kid has an interest or even if they don't, in many parent-kid relationships, but your kid is pursuing something and you've decided that this is the right amount for you need to know right now, right? Like you see this, I mean, we talked about this as it relates to math, but like your kid's in 3rd grade, he's going to need to know the times tables. That's the right amount of math for right now. So everyone sit down. You guys ready? Because you're going to be walking out of here knowing the times table. And that kind of mentality can carry over into self-directed pursuits too, where it's like, oh, well, now you're interested in the guitar? Great. Guitar lessons, practicing an hour a day. Like, you just got to be like something someone said to me once that stuck with me was they just want their kids to be doing something. They wanted their kids to be pursuing something. And it's like, well, what if they just start and then they stop? Because that happens, by the way, in self-directed learning.
And that's what self-directed learning really is, right? It's letting them pursue it really on their own timetable and in their own way. And it doesn't mean that we aren't involved and we don't support and guide and make suggestions or offer what the resources that they need or point out when we see them approaching it in one way and we could see a different approach might help. But I think that's an art. And I think the more self-directed you allow your kids to be, the more open they are to your support. And if your support doesn't look like basically trying to get them to do it your way, guided, disguised as support, then I think you're going to be okay. Like if they can be self-directed and know that we're here to support them to pursue things in their own way, then they'll really open up to us.
Yeah. And this can be hard, by the way. Like I know I'm thinking about dinosaurs. You remember our oldest son was super interested in dinosaurs and claimed that he was someday going to get a tattoo that said documentary. Where was it going to be on his
stomach? It was going to be on his belly because he watched so many documentaries about dinosaurs.
He
when
watched
he was
every available documentary on YouTube, I'm going to say, very confidently.
And like DVDs from the library, everything he could find that books, we could find.
Turning them up. We had a huge book that just had basically every dinosaur in it, and he would learn their names and whatever. And obviously, like as a parent of your firstborn, you're like, ooh, he's going to be a dinosaur guy someday.
Probably going to be an archaeologist.
Yeah, that's the fancy term. We don't. Not all of our listeners are going to be up on all the science, but yes.
Oh my goodness.
He's going to be a dinosaur guy, and he's going to be so into dinosaurs.
Paleontologist?
That's another
group
that studies dinosaurs too. Know it all. But and learning about dinosaurs is also like one of those like cute / kind of impressive things.
Socially acceptable things.
You've got this 3-year-old and he comes in and regales you about the Dromaeosaurus or whatever.
Sure.
And like, it's charming. It's really like sweet. And then just like one day, dinosaurs, boring. Don't care about dinosaurs at all. And like, I felt a huge sense of loss because like, we were connecting around the dinosaurs. We were sitting there reading the books together. I was learning about dinosaurs. You know? And that was just the first of many examples of our kids going pretty hard at something.
Totally.
Stopping, sometimes just completely, and it feeling hard. And so that is the type of thing, and this I guess relates to the guitar thing as well, where it's like you can see your kid demonstrating a proficiency in something, or you can see something that seems really exciting and really interesting for your kid. And when that stops, I think a natural thing based on what I've heard from other parents too is actually to feel a little bit worried. It's like, especially if you're letting them be as self-directed as they want to be.
Because they might really chill out for a while after going so deep on something too,
right?
And
you might ask yourself like, oh, what should I just be pushing? Is this where I should be stepping in and like helping them over this plateau? Like, they're hitting this plateau in their guitar right now, but that's natural. And I know that if I push them through on the other side, they're going to be like awesome in the guitar, right?
Yeah. And what's really interesting that a lot of parents who practice this approach with their kids will say, and I'm really starting to see this and I'm trying to fully learn it, is that during those quieter times, like after a kid has a big explosion of really going deep on something, during those quieter times when it appears that nothing is happening, that really is like, they're like, kids really need that time to decompress. Right. Their brains need that time to rest. And they always come back to a new interest or come back to trying to further develop a new skill. And sometimes even if they're coming back to a skill they used to be practicing, it will be amazing because you'll see them have more proficiency with that skill and they literally haven't actually actively done anything. It's like, I feel like there probably is brain research on this, but if their brain is like solidifying those connections and with age and time, all of a sudden have more proficiency at it and they're ready to kind of go at it again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that point about decompressing, I think is a really good one because that is another, I think, probably pretty important life skill. And we'll get into specific examples of learning like this, but learning your own, we talked about natural rhythms recently too. Learning your own natural rhythm around learning is really important, and understanding that burnout is going to happen, and that
Yeah.
oftentimes the answer to feeling a little bit burnt out isn't to just keep grinding on something.
Yeah.
It's not just to keep going back every day. And this thing that once brought you joy can bring feelings of resentment very quickly, in my experience. Having basically turned my hobby into my profession when I learned to play poker professionally, this thing, and I was very excited and filled up by poker for like 4 or 5 years. But for the last 2 years, I couldn't stand it.
Yeah.
But I had to keep playing because it was my job. But that feeling totally changed. And I actually did stop pursuing learning about it. I was kind of just going through the motions because I felt like it was something I had to do. And I think you see that around, well, traditional subject matter, but I think you see it around sports and music
Right.
and these kind of things that are considered the acceptable side hobbies of the world. And I feel like, yeah, parents are very concerned, and I'll throw myself into this group too, about that finality that you talked about. Like, oh, if he puts this down, is he just going to never pick it up
all
again?
over.
Like, why did he spend all that time developing all these skills and now he's just done? Like,
And to be honest, the particular subject matter that gets put down might be done forever.
right.
But that, and we'll kind of wrap up later with this, that doesn't mean that all has been lost. That doesn't mean that there was nothing that came from that experience, because
Yeah.
so much has come from every kind of learning endeavor that our kids set themselves off on.
Absolutely. I think about like those learning paths as like training for a marathon, right? Like if you've ever trained to run a great long distance, I actually haven't run a marathon, but I have trained for long distance running. And when you're building up for a specific race, like it's this build up, it's this daily routine. And then the race happens. And then usually you just need to be done for a little while. You're
Yeah.
like, ugh, there was the race. And then at some point that itch comes back where you're like, I could start running again.
Yeah.
You know? And I think learning is the same way, where like, just to use our son Ollie in this example, like he went super deep on this game, Overwatch, for a while, went so hard at it for like 6 or 7 months. Like I'm talking full-time job plus hours for at least a 3-month stretch there. And when he stopped, it was like, yeah, he just went totally
He was done.
done for a while.
Yeah.
Just was off it. And it took him a while to like decompress, because I think that was a really intense period for him. It was very high stakes for him to feel like he was improving at it, whatever. And then at some point he was just ready. There was no announcement or anything, but he was ready. And then he was like back on a new thing. And it was
Sure.
like,
A
now
new
I'm going
interest.
hard
Yeah.
at this and I'm going to put myself back into this. But yeah, that decompression period. And I think like developing that rhythm and recognizing, and now that he has a touchstone, he can trust himself, right?
Yeah.
The next time he is between interests, he can look back, and hopefully with our help too, and say like, oh, remember the last time you were in this period of uncomfortable uncertainty around what the next big thing was for you? Like,
Yeah.
you'll find it.
You'll find it. It'll come. Yeah, for sure.
Cool. So let's talk about some of the things we've seen. I mean, we can get into at least a few specific
Sure.
examples, and we kind of put them into different buckets here. I'll just share the buckets and then we can jump into one. So we kind of separated things just randomly, I guess, into unintentional skill development. So this is things you sort of pick up along the way. Intentional skill development, like Ollie in that video game. Subject matter learning, like you just want to, and Ollie and the dinosaurs.
Yeah,
are another
learn about a
example we'll
topic.
talk about soon. And then like life skills, things that you pick up that, again, people are very concerned about when it comes to self-directed learning. And like, where does that acquisition come from?
Right.
If you aren't forced to learn X,
Right.
Responsibility, then how will you learn it?
Sure.
So, is there a bucket that calls to you to start with?
Let's talk a little bit about intentional skill development. And
Great.
you just talked a little bit about Ollie intentionally developing skills on that one game. So another one that we could talk about is our kids and how they've learned to swim. And I think that their path has looked really different than a lot of other kids, because we offered, but they were never interested in formal swimming lessons. And so we never signed them up because they just didn't want to do them. So we've always obviously had to be, and every parent is, super vigilant around water with them. And they've gone through phases of enjoying being in the water and swimming a lot, and phases where they weren't so into it. And we've tried really hard to just give them that space. And then all of a sudden, pretty much this year, since this summer, and I would say it started a little bit last summer for our oldest, this is the two older ones, both decided that they're just ready to do it and they're ready to learn. And we still haven't done any formal lessons, but our oldest can now swim pretty well. Like he can get from point A to point B and stay above the water and go under and be okay and all of that. If he ever wanted to get more proficient at the different strokes or things like that, he knows that he can ask for lessons and that he can learn that. He hasn't really demonstrated an interest in that at this point, but he totally decided he was ready to learn, and we would go to the pool and he would practice, and he'd practice going under in the bath to get that skill. And then our middle one, also, his explosion in swimming has been super recent. It's kind of happening right now. We have a membership to a place with an indoor pool now that it's cold here. And the past few times, really since this summer, but the past few times we've gone, he's all of a sudden just kind of decided, I'm ready. And he's just kind of put on the goggles, put his head under, and just started swimming around a ton.
Right.
And again, this is one of those situations where you're like, okay, this is happening, and we haven't really done a lot of formal instruction. I mean, to be fair, a lot of the times he's had his grandma, James's mom, with him, and she's just really joyful about it, and she'll say, give him little challenges of swimming to her, and he's totally open to that and asking for it and wanting it, and it's like a point of connection for them as well, which is, I think, how a lot of our kids' self-directed learning happens too when it comes to things that they need a little more support with. So yeah, he's just kind of decided that he's going to go for it, and he's really done it in his own way and on his own timeline. And right now he's just wanting to swim all the time. Like we're going to go later today because he said that's what he wants the family to do today, and we have some time. So
Monday fun day.
Monday fun day. Swimming with really sore throats sounds kind of good.
Absolutely. But yeah, the skill development thing, it is interesting because implicit in being able to be self-directed in learning a skill is also the idea that your kid could elect not to learn that skill. And when it comes to something like swimming, people really don't like the idea of their kids not knowing how to swim. I've found.
And to some degree, I get that. Like,
yeah,
I understand the approach of like, if my kid ever finds themselves in some water by mistake,
of course,
I want them to be safe. Yeah.
Me too. Yeah. And I think this illustrates one of the key approaches I've found to helping kids be self-directed is just laying out opportunities for them, bringing them to a pool or offering to go there and doing it in a really like hands-off, low stakes way. Like, let's bring the floaties. You don't know how to swim yet? No worries. You know, they're going to look around. They're going to see the other people swimming. They're going to be curious or not. Right.
Right.
And then they can move on. And like a counter example to this would be bike riding in our family. We have a friend who was posting Facebook videos recently of their 2-year-old, I think, riding a pedal bike around in their driveway. Hopefully, she's a listener. Hopefully she knows who she is.
Tearing it up.
And it's so cute, by the way, watching this
really
2-year-old girl pedal her bike around the cul-de-sac there. But as a parent of someone whose kids have like been in and out of bike riding, it's just never been a thing. Like one of our kids was like pretty close, but just like not something he really likes to do. Our road is terrible, by the way, randomly. Like
they've just never really connected with it.
Yeah, it's just not
for lack of opportunity.
No, but they have access to bikes and thanks to generous neighbors, and they have a road and helmets or whatever, and they just don't like it right now. And my suspicion will be that they will do it at some point. But if they don't, again, I don't think when they're at the big job interview someday, someone's going to say, hey, why don't we ride our bikes over to the local park and like finish this interview? And they're going to be like, no,
I can't.
You know? Yeah. And so I think the motivations for our kids to learn these self-directed things comes from all different directions, like social pressure or interest or something looks fun or whatever. And that most of the things that you're most concerned about are probably things your kids are going to want to develop skills around at some point, and if they wind up not, then it's probably only going to be because it wasn't actually important.
Right, it wasn't important enough, because I believe that, if something is important enough, barring any true developmental or learning challenges, a person at some point is going to choose to learn it.
Yeah, and so this is actually blends into, and some topics are going to blend across multiple buckets here, but one of the ones that's had some crossover here is around reading in our family, where I think we may have mentioned
we've definitely talked about
Ollie's journey to reading in the past, where he just wasn't doing it, totally resisted any attempts to be helped with this because as we were still making our way in the world. And then one day randomly, he was just like reading to his little brother. And we were like, okay.
Guess you read now.
That? And he's like, no, I just recognize these words. But then he was also, quote unquote, recognizing words that he had never seen before.
Yeah, he had the phonetics down too.
Yeah, the phonetics had kind of spoken to him. And so that was sort of like I believe that was like sort of unintentional skill development where it was just like happened kind of.
Yeah. He wasn't choosing to practice, but it was useful enough in enough areas of his life and in enough situations where he was spending his time that
words were coming up. He
developed it. Yeah.
Yeah. Via osmosis. This sort of thing happened naturally, totally. Yeah. Hands off. Kind of self-directed, but just kind of happened.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, probably don't need to say this, but he's surrounded by written words, right? It's like he's in a rich enough environment where there's things to read in front of him all the time.
Right. And so, but then where it crosses over is Ezzy is currently in this process and
he's 6.5.
He's 6.5, yeah. And probably can read, I don't know, 100 or more words now. We'll randomly just like look at something and be like, oh, it says whipped topping or whatever, right? And Thanksgiving themed podcast. And he has asked for a little bit more help with things. I feel like you have this magnetic board with words on it. And he was like going in there and like, trying to pick out the ones he could read and asking what the ones he couldn't. And I don't think all of the phonetics have sort of clicked yet, but some of them have. And so he is seeing, like, he also really desires to be able to read. Like,
he does.
He would really rather not have to ask what something says or whatever. And so for him, it's a hybrid approach, I guess, where he's been super self-directed in it. Now is the time that he appears interested in it.
He's asking for some support, but at the same time, I've done this long enough to know that I need to continue to really follow his lead with that support, because even this morning he was like asking me to help him read some words and I was trying really hard to just follow his lead and he still didn't really love the way I was doing it. So it's really like a delicate thing that I think to some may look like I'm being way too hands off, but I've learned, especially with him, that I have to tread really, really lightly.
Well, yeah, because you can just turn it into a thing. You can turn it into
a point of tension.
Yeah. Like, oh, you're coming around. Like, I don't even want to talk about reading. I don't want to show that I can read anything. And I think that can happen on both sides, by the way. I think getting too hands on and like trying to make it about your process and how you envision it can make it a tough interaction. And I think making it all about that skill being pleasing to you, coming in and being like, wow, now you impress me. Now I approve of you because and you're never going to say those things, but like,
I think I still get caught up in that a little bit by being like excitedly surprised when he can read things. And
I do that too. And I think it's okay. I think it's okay to take delight in it, but I think the surprise thing is probably not where we want to be.
Well, and I think I am trying to be more careful about it because I wonder if it causes him to feel what I perceive as kind of like sad or upset when he can't read a word.
Yeah.
Whereas even though I overtly say like, it's okay if you can't read this, you're still learning. I just sometimes wonder about that. So.
Right. But the absence of that excitement might feel bad, right?
Yeah. It's a tough one.
For sure. So I'm going to go, you're pointing at somewhere on the screen. People can't see it. I'm going to just finish up on this.
Why don't you?
Regarding math, because the math thing has actually been really interesting where, like you mentioned that we play around with math a lot in our family. This has been one of the cooler things for me because not only have I seen our kids develop great proficiency in math without any like sitting down and doing times tables or anything like that, but also just a real love of like asking for math problems,
playing around with numbers.
Doing and actually one really cool thing was Ezzy has come up with, he developed without us ever teaching him a very interesting and fast way of doing addition. Mm-hmm. I don't know if have we talked about that? I think we have.
I think so.
But the way he does it is, like the other day he asked me, what's 999,999 plus 999,999, right? And so I know what this is, but because he had just like, I guess you guys were playing around with a calculator.
Yeah.
Doing this, but the calculator like couldn't handle the number. It was too big. And so then he was like, oh, wait. And then he said the answer and he was correct.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I was like, oh, how'd you do that?
Yeah.
And because like in my day, we would have lined up the two numbers and like carried the one times and like gone through the whole thing. And he said, oh, well, I just added one and that made it 1,000,000. And then I had 999,998 left over. And so that was the answer.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, yeah. Right. But that's like just how he thinks about math
now. So you rounded to the nearest easy number to work with, and then you subtracted. Yeah.
Right. And he did that like a different day. He like figured out a mental math problem faster than any of, it was like me and two other grownups, maybe Amy and Kyle, my brother and his girlfriend, were in town, and it was like 58 plus 76 or something like that, and did it instantly. And I was like, oh, so at some point he just noticed this pattern, learning the language of math, and picked it up. And now he's extremely proficient and fast at adding even triple digits. I mean, in this case, 6-digit numbers.
Well, and that learning has been really meaningful to him because he has developed a really strong sense of the numbers instead of just the memorization of how to go through the formula.
Yeah,
of
he's
adding
picturing
them.
the numbers and kind of interacting with them. And there are going to be math problems where that trick won't work, but like that's not the point of it right now. The point is that he finds joy and finds it very useful for the games he plays, Minecraft, Fortnite, things like that, where math is just super present all the time to be able to do those and do them quickly.
Well, and I would argue that that's not even really a trick. That's just number sense.
Yeah, that's
honestly.
it's a tactic for that type of math problem. And again, it would be a lot more difficult if his numbers were, less clean, right? Like 776,521 plus whatever. But nonetheless, he's acquiring math proficiency, and multiplication has been the same way for them. They're acquiring math proficiency because numbers are all around us. We talk about numbers. Numbers are relevant to the things they like to do for fun. Video games in particular require numerical understanding almost regardless of what game you play. And the math thing has been totally no stress, no performance, no assessment, just fun. Yeah, just interacting with it and going for it. So
cool.
Did you wanted to go to...
Let's just talk about one more, because I feel like we're probably pushing it on time.
We're not going too bad, but go ahead.
Okay. So when you think about subject matter learning about specific topics and things like that, one cool thing that we have seen lately with Ezra is he's been really, really into learning about animals and insects and wildlife. And the way that he's been primarily engaging with that is by watching videos about them. Mostly on YouTube too, which I know a lot of YouTube strikes fear into the hearts of many parents. But I think that we've seen him, what he'll do is he has a few channels that he really loves, and sometimes he'll kind of take a detour to other ones, and we try to help him find ones he likes. But he'll watch these videos and learn about this wildlife, and he'll stop what he's watching and he'll come find somebody and tell us all about it because he's so excited to talk about what he's learned. And the coolest thing too is that he retains almost all of it. Like he has all of these facts in his head now about insects and how they sting and how they bite and different types of animals. And he wants to tell everybody or all of us about them. And I think one night you even asked him, like, how do you remember all of this? This is a lot because he knows stuff that I've never learned
he was
about
just
these animals.
off, like, essentially the Latin names of all these insects.
Yeah. And he said, well, I remember it when I watch it. And if I forget, but I really want to know it, I just go back to that video and watch it again. And that may seem so simple and obvious to us, but to me, that's such a beautiful illustration of a 6-year-old realizing like, oh, I have tools and strategies for learning things.
Yeah, he's studying.
Yeah, he's basically learning how to study. And he's like, man, it's really important to me to know this fact because I'm so interested in it. And I kind of forget, oh, right, I can just go back and watch it again and really help to solidify my knowledge.
Yeah, and I'd like to come clean here and say that when I first saw him watching one of these videos, it was basically this guy, Coyote Peterson, getting stung by like...
his channel is Brave Wilderness.
Yeah, getting bit by a caterpillar, I think is the one I saw him doing. And I was like, what are we watching today? Like, I was like right in the
what's happening?
Well, I was like, oh man, the YouTube rabbit hole strikes again. Like, is this even appropriate? So I sat down to watch just to like make sure it wasn't like, I don't know. I just like,
what's happening here?
Watch. Yeah. And that, when I sat down to watch, because I was like the concerned parent, that's when he started going in and being like, oh, this is such and such a kind of caterpillar. It ranks like 13th on the sting pain index or whatever. I was like, what? And then he's like, yeah.
As he was saying this?
Yeah, he's like, coming up in November, he's going to get stung by the executioner wasp, which is the number 1 on the pain sting index. So we're going to see how he reacts to it or whatever. And I was like,
by the way, that's tomorrow, and he has it on our calendar because he can't wait to see it.
That's so sweet. Yeah. But in that moment, I was like, oh, right. Like, here I am with the biased YouTube rabbit hole mentality. Yeah. And down the YouTube rabbit hole, he found an incredibly serious interest of his. Yeah, he's just straight in the flow, learning all this stuff that's so fascinating to him. Reptiles and insects, and now he wants to get a snake, by the way. So there's a lot of, but there's so much joy and interest coming, and it's kind of like infected other people in the family, and now his older brother's watching the videos. And just real learning, like true, authentic, lasting like it matters learning. To him. Yeah. And it's a very, very serious academic pursuit. Totally. And it didn't happen. Like, I could not have guessed. Incidentally, he was also really scared of bees this summer.
Yeah.
And I would never have guessed in a million years that the thing he would want to do for fun was watch people get stung by bees.
By choice, yeah.
Right. Like, I would think that would like give him nightmares or whatever, but
it's kind of helping him process it, I
definitely,
think.
Yeah. It's like giving him a realistic sense of what happens when you get stung by these things. That might have sparked his interest in the first place. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But it's been really cool to see. And this has been, and he is not the first kid in our family who has been drawn to some subject matter.
Sure.
And really learned way more than you'd ever have time to possibly learn. And I think this really speaks to the power of self-directed learning too, because if the most well-meaning adult is going to have a great deal of difficulty guessing, like especially if you have 30 kids in your charge, heaven forbid.
Oh, as a teacher,
and you're trying to guess, like, what's going to be something really interesting for all 30 of these kids at the same time?
Right now.
Like, you're never going to get there, right?
Yeah.
And even if you're like, oh, it's going to be science. You can all pick your own animal to study about. That's something that I did in 7th grade, and that was probably better than you must write something about the manatee, or whatever, right? But you're still going to get the most efficient way to engage someone in subject matter they really care about is to help them find it on their own.
Totally.
You know? Even though that can be scary and there can be downtimes and whatever else, right? So the last thing I wanted to bring up was around life skills, and this is another objection around helping kids to be self-directed more often. Will they ever develop these skills, not just about like reading, writing, whatever, but what about like being a responsible person? What about saving for a rainy day, or, you know?
Yeah, and I would say, I just want to,
friends or
like,
whatever, right?
Can I insert something real quick?
Go ahead.
I think the term responsible is a good one, because I do think that there's kind of a common belief that going to school and being given assignments and having to complete them develops a sense of responsibility. So I just want to say that. I think that's why that fear comes into play for people sometimes, because they're like, if my kid is never required to do anything or to work hard or complete assignments, how will they develop a sense of responsibility?
Well, and it's funny actually, because I think that going to school and doing that sort of thing actually probably does build skills for being a good employee in some ways.
Totally.
And like, there are going to be times, like if you're the boss, you know, I've been the boss before, you hire someone at that point, like you'd like them to love their work, obviously, but like at some point you'd just like them to show up and write the article like they did for our website, right? And if like, he's just like not in the moment, not feeling self-directed and passionate about writing the article, it's like, it's still kind of like you to write the article today. And then we can talk about if you want to write for us in the future, you know? And so part of that habit around like doing what you're told, basically, it can be useful. It can be a useful thing to be good at doing what you're told. Like, I don't want to dismiss that as an unimportant skill. For many jobs, you will need to land there. I would argue that if you're self-directed and passionate, like for me personally, I've been basically totally self-directed in my career and my pursuit of learning for almost 20 years now, and 15 years, we'll call it safely. And I'm still very employable because I choose jobs that I really love. And so like when I worked in ran a summer camp,
where you're willing to sit down and do the work needed.
Yeah, I was an employee of the board, but I was like super passionate about that job and went way above and beyond, I imagine, their expectations in terms of time committed, intentionality. What do they call it when you learn more than you need to?
I don't know.
No, you know, continuing education. That's what it's called.
Oh, well, I wouldn't say that's more than you need to, but sure.
Okay. We don't want the nitpicking portion of the podcast?
I think so.
The continuing education. But like, anyway, I would do that because in my mind, I never would have applied for a job that I didn't really love anyway.
Sure,
right? So, and not everyone's going to have the liberty to do that, you know, based on financial circumstances or whatever. But I want to say that not all is lost if you're developing those sorts of skills.
I would say too, if a certain lifestyle is important enough to our kids, like, let's say there's something they love so much, but it's not really something they can earn money at, that I would argue that they would still find a way to support that lifestyle. And they would find it important enough to go find a job, even if the job wasn't the thing they were passionate about, and get the work done and do what they were told so that they could support the lifestyle that they wanted to live. And obviously all of that is couched in, yes, I know that they are starting from a point where they have a lot of support and they're growing up with resources. And that's, you know, for some people not as possible, but.
Well, let me jump right in then, because you've reminded me of a great example of learning a life skill just autonomously. And that's around one of our kids and saving money, because this kid was a wild spendthrift, you know, like just any money that crossed his hands.
Burn in a hole.
Heading into some in-game purchase in an app or buying candy or like whatever, money would go through his hands like water, basically. It was like incredible to watch and very uncomfortable to watch. And then at some point he decided he wanted an iPad, and iPads are pretty expensive, especially if you spend your money the instant you get it. He had $0 when he started this process, and currently is up to $138 and hasn't spent a dime, I don't think.
No.
Hasn't spent a single dime.
In months and months and months.
Since he decided. And this is like a week after spending $35 on like a set of Fortnite
totally
skins, right?
And he just decided he was done. And that money has been accumulated in a combination of gifts, and then also he does work for us, and we pay him.
I'd say the majority has come from
working
pretty thankless jobs, like weeding with me in the blazing
washing
hot
the
sun, or
windows,
picking up rocks for my mom, or like hard labor for him in some cases. And that process of like, I want something. How do I get it? I need to earn money.
And I need to make some different decisions.
And when I have the money, I can't just run out and just dump it on the latest shiny object.
Yeah.
Like, he went grocery shopping with me the other day and was even seeing like, all
the stuff he could buy. Oh my gosh.
And he also hadn't eaten breakfast when he went too. So it was like, you don't go shopping on an empty stomach sort of situation. But it was like fascinating to watch, but he still just held strong. He's like sticking on 138, and like reasonably, he probably could have gone down to 134, and like it wouldn't have really made a difference.
Yeah.
But like, he's made this decision and he's focused on it, and that life skill of like saving, which most grown-ups struggle with.
It's hard,
He's practicing now, and I don't know if who knows what his spending habits will look like in adulthood, but right now he's practicing, and that's just one of countless myriad examples of your kids being sponges for learning what the world wants to teach them. Right?
Yeah,
and
totally.
As long as we don't, again, be a barrier to learning like that. Like he demonstrated a desire for this thing and we just jumped up and sprinted out and bought it. He might have gone right back to the in-app purchases and whatever else. But in this instance,
there were multiple reasons we didn't do that.
Right, right. But in this instance, like he just had the motivation and went for it. So life learning accomplished.
Done. Check.
So I was concerned that we would run out of things to say, but we are almost exactly
we never do
at the length of time that we normally go. And there's so many more examples of self-directed learning and the incredible nature of it that have happened in our family. But hopefully this gives you a decent picture of like our attitudes around it, acknowledging the challenges and pitfalls that can come with it. And
then what it actually looks like when you get down to it. And obviously what it looks like, I think this is the whole point, is going to look super different for every single kid. And in families whose kids have really different interests than ours, it will look really different. But I think the overarching theme is that they're engaging on their own accord and they have support, and they, in the process of whatever they're actually, like whatever skill or subject they're pursuing, they're also just learning how to learn, learning how to get new information, learning about their own learning process, developing a sense of like, I think, competency and belief that they can learn and that they are capable. And so all of these things that are coming from the pursuits are bigger than the pursuits themselves. And I think that's a common thread that you'll see in any self-directed learning family. Yeah,
absolutely. And again, even if you aren't in a position where your kids are home or on a self-directed learning path at all, like these things can absolutely apply to all of your kids' discretionary time.
Yeah,
giving
totally.
them space and full-on support too. And they know it when they know they're supported. That is the environment. As you're setting up your little terrarium for learning in your home, the most important ingredient, the big light that makes your lizard not die because he's cold-blooded, is your warmth and support. Because kids can come out of that even if they're not supported and like still be passionate, self-directed learners for sure. But by far, I think the biggest variable is going to be whether they feel like they have the space to do things, even if they're weird, to get involved in stuff, even if their parents don't get it, and whatever else. So, best of luck in pursuing and supporting self-directed learning in your family.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us on this journey. And remember that each moment is a new opportunity to be the parent that you hope to be.
Like you guys. Just kidding. Love you guys. You were worried, but I still love you guys.
I was worried.
See you next time.
Thank you for listening to One Free Family. If you enjoy the podcast, please show your support by becoming a patron at onefreefamily.com/support. Your support will help make this show better. Plus, you can get access to rewards and additional episodes by joining. Again, that's onefreefamily.com/support. This has been a Pax Libertas Productions podcast.